Scott has Garrett Crochet ranked where? Let's find out. Happy Thanksgiving week and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Monday, November 25th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White. Today on the show, we are taking a look at Scott's early top 50 starting pitchers for 2025. We won't talk about every name. We'll be going in groups of 5, but I'll pick out some of the more interesting ones and we will have a discussion. Also, I have a surprise for you, Scott. Are you ready?
Sure.
So it's Thanksgiving week. I know that you enjoy your food content. Also on today's show, we are going to build Scott's ideal Thanksgiving plate.
Oh, wow.
The podcast. So we'll pick 3 sides, one veggie, one starch, one other. We'll have a meat choice, and a dessert. So there you go.
Okay.
So
I'm down. I'm down.
Get the wheels turning, Scott. Start thinking ahead. That's what we'll have today.
It'll probably be a pretty boring plate. I'm on the traditional side. Well, with most things, but certainly with Thanksgiving dinner. But it'll be fun.
Yes, indeed it will. All right, let's jump in. Early top 50 starting pitchers, and your top 5 for next year, Scott. You have Tarek Skubal, Zach Wheeler, Paul Skeens, Chris Sale, and Corbin Burns. These are all names that we talked about last week on our recap. I don't think there's really any surprises here. The only question I have is about Chris Sale. So he did say last week when we're recording this that he's fully recovered from the back spasms that kept him off the Braves wildcard roster. It just feels like last year was the time to buy Chris Sale when you were getting him at that discount. Obviously, you're going to have to use a probably top 3-round pick to get him in 2025. Can he repeat the health and performance 2 years in a row, soon to be 36 years old? I don't know. I worry about it.
I worry about it too. And I think when we talked about him a couple shows ago, the way I described my ranking of Chris Sale is, okay, there's an obvious top 3 here, Skubal, Wheeler, Skeens. And then who belongs 4th? I think it's, I don't know that I'm in my official tiers. I'm going to have them as separate tiers because you can only make the tiers so small at starting pitcher, but it does feel like a bit of a teardrop in terms of how confident I am that they'll perform like a total stud. And Chris Sale winds up at the top of that tier for me by default because he just won the NL pitching Triple Crown. Of course, he's going to be back with the Braves next year, so it's not like his circumstances are changing. But I would be lying if I said I felt totally comfortable drafting him here, given that, well, he spent most of the previous 4 years injured and wasn't healthy at the end of 2024, his healthy season either. So it's risky. It's not like as soon as the last of Wheeler, Skeens, and Skubal goes off the board. It's not like when the last of them goes off the board, I'm going to be like, oh, okay, I got to take Sale now. It's going to require him falling. But as I said on the last show, that's kind of true for all of these top level pitchers, all of this top 12 for me. That's just probably not a range of the starting pitcher rankings that I'm going to be living in, given the breakdown of the position this year.
Yeah, and I completely agree that after the top 3, it feels like it kind of opens up. You can have a few different answers as to who you think the SP4 should be drafted. And, I posed that question on Twitter, and I got a bunch of different responses from Sale, Burns, Logan Gilbert. Some people said, like, Jacob deGrom. I got a few, like, Garrett Crochet.
Wow, how quickly do we forget on Jacob deGrom? We were kind of done drafting him as a top 5 pitcher even before the Tommy John surgery because we couldn't count on him to stay healthy. So I get your overall point. And I don't even think you like, because my 5th obviously is Corbin Burns after Chris Sale. I don't even think you like Corbin Burns as much as I do, right? Don't you have him lower than 5th?
I haven't actually ranked pitchers yet. I mean, I think I will probably have him a little bit lower than that. I'm not completely off. I do like the fact that he talked about the cutter. He made the changes. The strikeouts kind of bumped back up in September, and he's just so proven from a ratio workhorse perspective. I want to see where he winds up in free agency for the most part, but Yeah, I might have him a little bit lower than this, but he's still going to be in my top 10. So I'm not going to be completely out on Corbin Burnes by any means. Let's move on to the rest of your top 10. 6 through 10, you have Logan Gilbert, Cole Reagans, Blake Snell, Dylan Cease, and Garrett Crochet, who I mentioned up at the top. You have him here at your SP10. I want to focus on him and Blake Snell. So Snell is a name we have not talked about yet. He had his usual slow start. Maybe that was kind of enhanced due to signing so late in spring training. But then he went on one of those runs. His final 14 starts, a 1.23 ERA, 0.78 whip, 12.8 K per nine for Blake Snell. And then Garrett Crochet, he's a tough one to rank. He was one of the biggest breakouts this past season. He had a 3.58 ERA, a 1.07 whip, 12.9 K per nine, nearly a 30% K minus walk rate. I mean, it's truly elite stuff, but where is he playing next season? My guess is on a much better team than the White Sox. And how does his arm respond? I mean, this is, again, this is the theme, Scott. Pitchers that made this huge jump in innings. He only 12 2/3. Garrett Crochet did in 2023. He was all the way up to 146 this past season. So that's a big jump. So your thoughts here on Snell and Garrett Crochet?
Yeah, so the point about the big innings jump, and I brought this up on the last show as well, it's part of the reason I'm not really going to be living within this range of the starting pitcher rankings. It's like they're clearly the guys who deserve to rank here. We could argue whether Snell is, but for the most part, the 10 names you've mentioned, they clearly need to rank here. And yet there are some concerns related to that big workload increase for at least half of them. And then there are other concerns beyond that for several of the others. So it's not like you're getting such a thing that
whoa. We are getting a special Thanksgiving visit from Robo Scott.
Of course. Of course it would be the show where Chris isn't here to like jump in and save me from my robotic ways.
He's back. What a nice time to visit. We are thankful for Robo Scott.
Yeah. Anyway.
Like you were saying about
he's
Garrett
gone
Crochet.
now, right? Like Robot Scott is gone.
Yeah,
Robo Scott.
You're
He's
good.
left us. Good. I don't even remember what I was saying. Anyway, let's get into Snell. Let's get into Blake Snell because I feel like maybe this is the most controversial of these players in terms of how high I rank him, 8th. And I kind of laid it out already. We've gone back and forth with Blake Snell so much over the last few years, just breaking down what his numbers look like through the first 10 starts this year versus the final 20, what they look like through the first 12 starts this next year versus the final 15. And his tendency to like turn on a dime, go from being totally useless early on to arguably the best pitcher in baseball, to the extent that it actually won him a Cy Young in 2023. And I kind of think we're overcomplicating it. I kind of think we have enough data here that we don't have to concentrate so much on the minutia. We can just look at over the last 3 years. Blake Snell has a 2.82 ERA, 1.16 whip, and 12 K per nine, which is amazing, which is as good as anyone else in this group, better than some of them. And to a certain extent, it doesn't matter how he gets there. I think to the vast extent, it doesn't matter how he gets there. He gets there. Those are the overall numbers over the last 3 years. I'm not just talking about the good stretches. I'm including all the bad stretches in there too. And so maybe it's a little frustrating during those bad times, but boy, does it feel good during the long ones. And the long ones have been exceeding the bad ones. Certainly the last 2 years, that's been the case. So I think we should just treat him like an ace because that's overall what he's performed like. And he's among this group that I'm kind of just ignoring this range of the starting pitchers. So again, it's going to take a discount for me to actually take him, but he's the one most likely to be discounted. I rank Blake Snell, in addition to 8th at starting pitcher, I rank him 45th overall. In our first mock draft, I got him 76, the middle of round 7. So that's kind of where I'm waiting to draft a pitcher. And if it happens to be Blake Snell, I'm going to be thrilled because I have him 8th at the position.
And in this draft that I'm doing over at the NFBC, a 15-team league, he went 59th. So just some more added fuel there, Scott. If you want to wait and take Snell as your SP1, I think you're probably going to be able to do it in a lot of drafts. To your point about his inconsistencies and the stretches he goes on, by the end of the season, he usually gets there, obviously gets there. Maybe he's like discounted a little bit more in a head-to-head points league just because that inconsistency. You kind of need a little bit more, weekly consistency. I know a lot of people complain about, players that are really streaky in the head-to-head league. So maybe just something that people keep in mind for Blake Snell. The only other thing I'll add on him is the workload. He's only exceeded 130 innings once in his last 5 full seasons. So that's another concern for me, at least. I think if you take Blake Snell, you might want to pair him with other pitchers that you feel a little bit better about the innings projection.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the workload thing exists for most of this list, though, as I already pointed out. Certainly Chris Sale, that's an issue for him, and so many others, even Cole Reagans, who hasn't had any injury problems the last couple years, but 2 Tommy John surgeries in his past.
Yeah.
So it's not like Blake Snell is unique in that regard. Sure, it's an issue, but it's not exclusive to him.
All right, let's talk about this Thanksgiving plate, Scott. We'll kick things off. We'll start with a veggie. Let's get the veggie out of the way, and then we'll, talk about some of the more fun, the better stuff later on. What's your ideal veggie side on Thanksgiving? You got options. You got Brussels sprouts, you got green beans, broccoli, cream spinach. Anything else that comes to mind? What do you got?
Well, the ideal Thanksgiving vegetable for me is inarguable. In fact, it might be my favorite part of the Thanksgiving plate. And considering it's the vegetable, that's saying something. Because vegetables are normally not the best part of any plate. I think you'd agree. It's green bean casserole. Now, some people hate green bean casserole. Some people love it. I've noticed it makes a difference how it's made. Canned green beans, no good. Even fresh green beans. I don't know if you've noticed this with fresh green beans, but they can get a little stringy. If you're not careful to cut off the little pointy ends, it can really throw off the texture. It's just you're playing with fire with fresh green beans. So you really want to go with the frozen and still be careful not to include those little pointy ends that nobody likes the texture of. You got to kind of maintain it. And you got to cook the green beans first. You don't want them too crisp in that casserole. You kind of want them to blend in with the cream of mushroom soup. Of course, you got to have the fried onion topping. Of course, like that's really what you're there for. And then the green bean is kind of the vehicle for it. But yeah, always been a big fan of that. As long as you take care to make it properly and don't just, it's green bean casserole, whatever, and just throw it together like you're going through the motions. Like, take care with everything you make. It's Thanksgiving, for goodness sake.
There you go. Love it. All right. We've got our first out of the way. Green bean casserole, the veggie side here for Scott on Thanksgiving.
Before we pick one, or is it just me? Is it all about me today?
Nobody wants to hear about my food choices.
Nobody does.
I would just choose like chicken tenders for every single one of them. That's the end of my Thanksgiving plate. Before we hit our first break, just a reminder, download and follow our 5-minute podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. If you're watching on YouTube, you can scan the QR code, and that will take you right to the FBT in 5 podcast feed. Let's take our first break. When we return, back into the starting pitcher rankings right after this.
Welcome to JJ's.
I'll have a... Wait, there's no way I can get a burger?
No chance. But you can have the NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount+. Oh, hang on. There's a toy.
Welcome back in. Diving back into Scott's top 50 starting pitchers for next season. And 11 through 15, we have Garrett Cole, George Kirby, Framber Valdez, Michael King, and Shota Imanaga. Good old Garrett Cole. Let's talk about it. He had the elbow injury. He came back and made 17 starts. He had 5 more in the postseason. But in the regular season, a 3.41 ERA, a 1.13 WHIP. ERA estimators in the mid to high threes. The swinging strike rate dropped down to 10.7%. But Scott, based on this ranking, SP11, it seems like you are expecting at least some level of return to form here for Garrett Cole.
Well, let's look at what he actually did. Of course, he didn't look like prime Garrett Cole, but prime Garrett Cole would be going first or second in this draft. And he would be first or second in these rankings. He wouldn't be 11th. So I'm not ranking him like prime Garrett Cole. So he doesn't necessarily have to perform like prime Garrett Cole to live up to this ranking. What he actually did was put together a 3.41 ERA, 11.13 WHIP, 9.4 K per nine. It's pretty good numbers. I think definitely in the discussion to be a top 12 type pitcher with those numbers, presuming he gets the workload. So I'm kind of baking in a degree of Cole's never going to be the same again with this ranking. And yet it's possible he regains the slider after an offseason of rest on that elbow. He gets the bite on it back. He's comfortable throwing it as often again and looks like prime Garrett Cole. It's also possible that his elbow still isn't quite right, and that's why he wasn't throwing the slider, and he's going to suffer through this again next year. So there's kind of three separate paths I feel like Cole can take. And I'm taking the middlemost path with the ranking, that he's healthy now, but he's diminished and will remain diminished. And, if it goes one of the other routes, you'll get either a great discount or he'll be a bust. And, as we've been saying, every starting pitcher, every time you make a big investment in a starting pitcher, there's a high probability of bust just because that's the nature of the position.
And just a heads up on the postseason numbers for Garrett Cole, the 2.17 ERA, it looks nice, shiny, fancy. 2.17 sounds great. 1.28 WHIP, and the strikeout rate plummeted 6.8 K per nine to 3.1 walks per nine in the postseason. It's a small sample size, but I just don't want people to just be fooled into thinking, oh, Garrett Cole was back in the postseason. He did pitch well for stretches, but the strikeouts obviously not where we need them to be for Garrett Cole. 16 through 20 in your rankings. You have Tyler Glasnow, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Hunter Green, Pablo Lopez, and Luis Castillo. So 3 names here we have not talked about yet in the past couple weeks, including Yamamoto, Pablo Lopez, and Luis Castillo. Yamamoto, to me, Scott, feels like the most interesting of this group. He pitched really well in his rookie season. Splitter and curve look like legitimate plus pitches for him. The problem is that he was limited to just 90 innings with a right shoulder strain. So, ranking him SP 17, how many innings are you expecting for him heading into year 2?
I'm non-committal, and that's why I don't like making projections, because I'd have to be committal if I made projections, right?
Well, let me provide you with this then. The only projection system out right now is Steamer. They have Yamamoto for 181, which I think is very generous.
Very generous. I agree. If I thought he was going to get 180 innings, he'd be top 10 for me. He'd be ahead of Blake Snell, probably, because the ratios justify it. But that's a guy whose entire major league career, it's 1 year, I get it, but he only got halfway to 181. And 181 is a really high number these days. That seems like a very bold prediction. I will note that after he returned from injury for the Dodgers, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, the length of his starts were 4 innings, 4 innings, 3 innings, 5 innings, and then we get into the postseason, where his starts were 3 innings, 5 innings, 4 1/3 innings, and then finally 6 1/3 innings. He finally gave us a decent starter's workload, 9 starts or 8 starts into his return from the IL, which also gives me concern for Yamamoto. It's not just about him staying healthy. It's about, do the Dodgers let him loose when he is healthy? Are they going to treat him more than other pitchers like it's a 6-man rotation? Because that's the kind of because they want to keep him healthy and because that's the kind of routine he's used to from Japan. So I think there are workload concerns here for Yamamoto on several levels. And that's why I prefer to take a cautious ranking here. But he's really good. And if all goes right workload-wise, there's a good chance Yamamoto's competing for the Cy Young. But this is also a range in the pitcher rankings where there's a lot of good pitchers with potential Cy Young ambitions. So I don't think it's unfair to put Yamamoto this low.
Let's quickly mention Pablo Lopez and Luis Castillo. Pablo Lopez, I mean, the tale of two seasons. His first 15 starts, he had a 5.63 ERA and a 1.25 WHIP. His final 17 starts, a 2.91 ERA and a 1.15 WHIP. The end result was still an ERA over 4 and a WHIP approaching 120. Luis Castillo looks very clearly like he's on the decline. You know, the strikeout metrics dropped down quite a bit this year. Fastball velocity has declined 2 years in a row as well. Probably still could be worthy of this kind of SP2 ranking. But any quick thoughts here, Scott, on Pablo and Castillo?
Yeah. And this is really where we get into the stretch of the pitcher rankings, and it's going to continue for like the next 30 names, where it feels like I have the pitcher in question ranked too low. For every single one, it's going to feel like it's too low. How come I can't get them higher? Pablo Lopez and Luis Castillo, we're just used to putting him in the top 12 automatically. Like they've been around a while. We know they're going to give us a lot of innings. Let's just play it safe and put them there. But I'm kind of tired of taking that approach with them. The very next one, little foreshadowing here. Aaron Nola is my number 21, and he's part of that group too. Mm-hmm. Where okay, yeah, they're going to be durable probably. I mean, Castillo did spend some time on the IL this past year, but he has a long history of durability. And so if they give us their A results, sure, they'll be aces in fantasy, but a lot of times they don't. Nola, 3 of the last 4 years, he's fallen short of ace standards, I would say, in terms of actual performance. Pablo Lopez, it's really just that 2023 season where he actually performed like the ace. Even though we see signs of acedom in there, we only once in his entire career has Pablo Lopez delivered an ERA below 3.6. So it's hard for me to treat him as an ace at this point. And then Castillo, we actually saw some decline from him. Not just the IL stint, but his velocity was down a little bit all year. And the strikeouts were down, the swinging strike rate was down. It could be genuine decline for him. So I am past the point of treating these guys like aces. It's certainly not unthinkable that they could perform like aces, but I think the odds are against it. And their main selling point is volume.
All right, Thanksgiving side number 2, Scott. We have the starch. This is a tough decision, man. This could make or break the plate right here.
Yeah, like half the plate is starches, right?
Yeah, but you can only choose one. It's your ideal plate. Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't knock anyone if you just made like a whole plate full of starches, but for this exercise, we'll choose Scott's favorite. Mac and cheese, you got stuffing, mashed potatoes, roasted potatoes, sweet potatoes, any kind of potatoes. What are you going with?
So, for most of my life, I think I'd say stuffing. I've always been a big stuffing fan. Of course, there's a lot of variations on stuffing. Dressing is how is similar to stuffing. It's kind of cooked on its own in a pan, and you kind of cut it out in these squares, and that's more of a Southern tradition. I feel like dressing versus stuffing, they're very similar. But I've decided in more recent years, what's actually been my favorite thing on the Thanksgiving plate the last 4 or 5 years is the sweet potatoes. Now they got to be cooked a certain way. I really like pecans in them. You got to get a lot of brown sugar in there.
Oh yeah.
You got to get it kind of brown it up, it's not just, you can't just have a sweet potato that you cut open and put butter on it or whatever. Like it's sweet potato casserole, emphasis on the sweet, you know? But that's probably my single favorite thing on the Thanksgiving plate right now. So I'm going to go with it as the preferred starch.
Do you get the marshmallow on top of the sweet potatoes too? Because I
could do that. I could take or leave the marshmallows, to be honest. I need the pecans. I need the brown sugar. And if marshmallows are on top, great, but I could live without them.
I got to tell you, Scott, about this. I went to a burger place a couple of years ago, and you order sweet potato fries. They automatically come with a marshmallow dipping sauce.
Yep.
And it was incredibly sweet all around, obviously. But it was so good.
It is good. I've seen that before. I mean, regular French fries are so good that it's hard for me ever to venture into sweet potato fry territory. But when you're not given the choice and they give you that little like marshmallow dipping sauce, that's quite a treat, Frank.
Yes, it is. All right, SP 21 through 25. You already gave a little foreshadowing here, but Aaron Nola, Logan Webb, Max Fried, Bryce Miller, and Bailey Ober. So 3 names we haven't talked about. Well, kind of 2 now because you talked a little bit about Nola, but Logan Webb and Max Fried. Kind of feels like just boring SP2s, I guess. Fried, I think, is the most interesting to talk about. It was a bit of a weird season for Fried. The walks were up, the whiffs were down a little bit. Still ended up with great ratios, 3.25 ERA, a 1.16 WHIP, and I think he's about as bankable for ratios as you can get. At the same time, I kind of feel like his arm might fall off. So Fried is another one where I would be very interested to see what kind of contract he gets, because if some team signed him to like a monster deal, then maybe they're not as worried about the arm as I am. What do you think?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he goes for, because I've long harbored doubts about Max Fried's health. In fact, one of my bold predictions from a September article that I wrote was that Max Fried will go for less on the free agent market than people are expecting because of concerns over his arm. It was something like that. I said it was pithier the way I put it in the article, but it was something like that. And yeah, I mean, that for the elbow, we saw trouble was with the elbow crop up for him in 2023, actually. And then, he continued to have stretches where he just, he missed time with injury. What would officially put him on the IL this past year? It wasn't the elbow, right?
I think it was a forearm strain.
Oh, okay. So it was something related. Yeah. And we've seen stretches from him where he just doesn't seem right. The final numbers end up looking fine, but he's never been a workhorse. He's only once thrown 180 innings in a season. The 174 and a 30 through this past year was the second most he's ever had. He's only twice during his whole time as a starting pitcher had more than a strikeout per inning. And this past year was 8.6. So he's not a big strikeout guy. He's not necessarily a big innings guy. He's probably going to be a good ERA guy, and depending on where he signs, a good wins guy. But if he misses too much time, it's not going to be like a high total, wins total, even if it's a good winning percentage. So I think there are a lot of reasons to be careful with Max Fried, and that's why I only rank him 23rd, even though he's kind of like Aaron Nola and Luis Castillo and Pablo Lopez. He feels like he just belongs high in the starting pitcher rankings because he's been there so long. And it's not like he's gone bad. He's just, I think there are limits to Max Fried's upside, and I think there are underlying concerns that are worth taking seriously.
Just wanted to mention with Logan Webb, because he was the pitcher I probably had the most exposure to this year. He basically just lost his changeup. It got hit really hard. From 2023, an 89.6 average exit velocity, 255 expected WOBA on his changeup. This past season, 92 mile per hour average exit velocity, 365 expected WOBA. So the ex-WOBA jumped up over 100 points on that changeup. Now, if he gets the feel for that pitch back and he can locate it, who's to say, maybe Logan Webb bounces back with like a low 3s ERA and a really good whip. But, he's not really one of these pitchers that has great skills kind of like under the numbers. he's really just a workhorse that you're hoping to get really good ratios from. So he'll be a name to pay attention to in spring training and kind of see where that changeup is for Logan Webb. SP 26 through 30, Scott, you're rocking the Spencer Strider shirt, and that's where he checks in. Number 26, Spencer Strider, followed by Shohei Ohtani, Jacob deGrom, Sonny Gray, and Justin Steele. 3 very polarizing pitchers here in a row, Scott, with Strider, Ohtani, and deGrom. You know, Strider and Ohtani returning from the elbow surgery. deGrom returned last season, but you know, it was Tommy John surgery, and we haven't seen him throw more than 92 innings since 2019.
Yeah.
How do you just figure out where to place these guys? Because I feel like that's one of the hardest things.
It is. And I put them together on purpose because major upside, but major injury risk and availability risk for Strider, Ohtani, and deGrom. So I didn't see much reason to separate them. And you're right, I am wearing my Strider shirt. I felt like I had to retire it, like put it on ice for all of 2024, basically, once he was hurt. I didn't want the reminder of, oh, this electric pitcher, we don't have him available to us. So I'm happy to be able to pull it out finally because we're talking about Spencer Strider again. Where to put this trio, Strider, Ohtani, and deGrom? Yeah, if I want them linked, where do I put them? That's going to depend on how shallow your league is, I think, how tolerant you are of risk. You know, obviously, shallower league, you could take on more risk. You could take them early or sell out for the upside harder. But in deeper leagues, you're going to have to be really careful with them. And I know some of those early 15-team mocks that we've been seeing, deep leagues, obviously, Spencer Strider's been going really late just because people don't want to risk too much on somebody who we don't know when he's going to be available. You know, it sounded like early on he was going to be available for the start of the season, but Alex Anthopoulos said pretty much in no uncertain terms that they're not expecting him to be available for the start of 2024. And he didn't really suggest when he would be available. If it's 2 weeks into 2024, great. But if it's 2 months into 2024, oof, that's going to be hard to live with. So, you know, hopefully we'll get more details on his timeline as the season approaches. I presume we will. And I can move Strider down or up as needed. I think it's more likely he'll move down than up. But let's not forget, at this time a year ago, he was the consensus number 1 in fantasy, a distant number 1 in strikeouts and wins in 2023. And as much upside as any pitcher in baseball. So you don't want to bury him. You don't want to forget about him. But you do want to pay close attention to the latest news we get on him. Ohtani is kind of a similar situation. The Dodgers are talking like he's not going to be ready to pitch right away. We think it's going to be soon afterward. Not that far into the season, but we don't really know because the bat is so valuable. They don't want to do anything that would compromise that. They're going to be extra cautious with him, I think. And then deGrom, okay, he should be available, but for how long? For how long? As you said, the most innings he's thrown since 2019 is what?
92.
2019 was a long time ago, and he's never gotten to 100 innings in a season since then. And I was to the point where I'm not sure he ever will, because that was the point in his career where he decided, I need to throw even harder. Winning Cy Youngs isn't enough for me. I need to be the best the game has ever seen. And I just don't think his arm is capable of, can hold up to it, can hold up to those kind of velocities. I think it breaks down under them. I think that's what the years since have shown. Now, interestingly, after coming back from Tommy John surgery, he wasn't throwing as hard. And normally that'd be a red flag in itself, but maybe it's for the best for deGrom. And maybe it can help him be more durable again, like pre-2019. But maybe he just was fresh off of Tommy John surgery and not ready to air it out completely. Like, part of it's going to depend on how deGrom approaches pitching going forward. But whatever concerns you had about his durability prior to Tommy John surgery, I don't think they should be diminished in his first year back.
One of the craziest, I would say, early price tags we see in drafts, Jacob deGrom being taken as the SP8 off the board, 40.7 is the ADP. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think that will be representative of every draft. But again, it only takes one person, right? Like Chris talked about this with Paul Skeens. It just takes one person in a draft to say, man, I really want Jacob deGrom, and snag him up in like the 3rd or 4th round. And yeah, like maybe it will have that effect on ADP. I'm not sure.
I mean, it's a more extreme example, obviously, than Skeens, because Skeens we're talking about, oh, is he drafted in round 1 or round 2?
Yeah.
DeGrom, I cannot, like, I wasn't ready to draft him 8th anymore before the Tommy John surgery. It's strange where the consensus develops around, like, we're just as a group, as an industry, we just decide, okay, we're going to be really optimistic about this guy. We're going to throw caution to the wind and just draft him like nothing could possibly go wrong. And how we've arrived there at DeGrom here in late November, it's worth noting. I think he'll trend down as we approach true draft season. But it is strange that there seems to be so much optimism for him right now. And you could say, okay, these are the high stakes leagues where you're really incentivized to finish first at all costs. And so people are just selling out for upside. But then why aren't they doing that with Strider? You know, it's inconsistently applied, that logic.
Yeah. Strider, by the way, if you just wanted to know, the ADP is 125. So a little bit different. He's going 80 picks after Jacob deGrom right now. Back to the Thanksgiving plate, Scott. You have green bean casserole. You have sweet potatoes on your plate. What kind of meat are you throwing on this plate? Obviously, you got turkey, the traditionalist, but what kind of turkey? Are you going with the white meat? You going dark meat? Are you grabbing the turkey leg? Are you maybe saying, I'm going to skip out on turkey this year? Pass the ham.
Oh,
what are you thinking?
Look, I'm not a huge turkey fan. I'm not craving turkey throughout the year, but it's Thanksgiving. You got to have turkey. I mean, it's Turkey Day.
Yeah, how else are you going to pass out on your couch? Come on.
Yeah, I like ham. I like a good honey baked ham, you know. But Thanksgiving calls for turkey. You ever been to Thanksgiving where they have both? Now that is a treat.
Turkey and ham?
Turkey and ham.
Yeah, that's my parents' house. They make
there
both.
You go. That's the dream, right? But you're forcing me to make this scant Thanksgiving plate that frankly just looks like a regular dinner plate with one of each type of food. And I can't skimp on the turkey. Like, Thanksgiving wouldn't be Thanksgiving without the turkey. It's like that Everybody Loves Raymond episode where Deborah cooked the fish instead, and it just total upheaval. You can't do that. And that's how I feel about it. As for what part of the turkey, I've never really warmed up to dark meat turkey. I think I prefer dark meat with chicken, you know, but with turkey, I don't know. It's just kind of tough. And like a turkey leg, it's tough. I prefer the white meat. It's not as flavorful, but I prefer the texture of it on turkey. And, you know, usually there's gravy that you can lather it up and improve improve kind of the dryness of it. But even if there's not gravy, I'd probably go for the white meat of the turkey.
All right, let's take our final break. When we return, we'll quickly hit some news and notes and then back into the rankings right after this.
If you love football, this is the best time of the year.
This is as big as it gets.
The stuff of absolute dreams.
Welcome back in. Some news and notes, and apologies. We are recording this a few days in advance, so hopefully this news isn't too outdated and we didn't miss anything else. But the MVP awards were announced on Thursday night, and both were unanimous as we expected. Aaron Judge in the American League and Shohei Ohtani in the National League. This was Judge's second MVP. It was Ohtani's third, and Ohtani joins Frank Robinson as the only player to win the MVP in both leagues, the American League and the National League. You know, Scott, as far as I'm concerned, I think two of the faces of the game right now. It's Aaron Judge and Ohtani.
I mean, it'll be the top two picks in most fantasy drafts, I'd say. A little bit of concern over Ohtani's shoulder. But yeah, I would say so. I mean, Ohtani's clearly the face of the game right now. He might be the best baseball player ever when you take into account that he's also a really good pitcher when he's healthy enough to do that. And even people say we haven't seen this since Babe Ruth, but you go back and look at Babe Ruth's career. By the time he really became the slugger we know him as, he stopped pitching. So I'm not saying like during the time with the Red Sox, yeah, he was hitting and pitching, but the really big Babe Ruth years as a hitter, he was done pitching. So he wasn't really doing it at the same time the way Ohtani does. And I think he's clearly the face of the game, and Judge, the fact that he's a Yankee doesn't hurt with that, but he's also the preeminent slugger in the game today, and a historic one with the 62 homer season, obviously, and just 2 years later, a season where he threatened that number. So, I agree.
The Phillies could hold Andrew Painter out of spring training to preserve his workload. And I had Welsh on the Friday episode, and he was really impressed with what he saw from Andrew Painter out in the Arizona Fall League. Scott, how many innings do you think we get from Painter with the Phillies next season? I'm not talking in the minors. It's, the time that he spends on the active roster. How many innings do you think we get from Andrew Painter?
Well, I'd say... I'm trying to remember what their starting five looks like, because I'd say he might.
Fifth starter as of now is Taijuan Walker. That's according to Roster Resource. So I feel like Painter could work in.
Right. And he was kind of trending toward joining the rotation before having the Tommy John surgery 2 years ago as a 19-year-old at that point. So I think that can happen again. They may prefer to go the route of let's bring him along slowly, because we know we can't give him a full season workload fresh off Tommy John. So let's kind of treat his April as spring training in the minors, sort of like the Pirates did with Paul Skeens this past year. And we don't end up seeing Painter till a quarter of the way through the season. I'm going to say that's the plan the Phillies will follow. And let's see, Skeens got to 133 innings. So I'll say 130 for Painter.
Total in the majors, or do you think that's
just in the majors? Just in the majors, 130.
I was thinking like 60 to 80, and maybe he gets like 20 to 40 in the minors, something like that. But all right,
no, I think he'll do better than that.
All right, according to
I don't rank him quite like that, so my prediction here is a fairly optimistic prediction, but I think Painter's deserving of it.
According to John Heyman, the Tigers and Red Sox have checked in on Alex Bregman. According to Ken Rosenthal, Blake Snell has already met with both the Dodgers and the Red Sox. Ken also reported that rival executives say the Cubs want to trade Cody Bellinger this offseason. And John Morosi reported the Red Sox could trade Willie Abreu. He mentioned the Mariners as a trade partner. And I don't know, Willie Abreu for Brian Wu? Who says no? I don't.
You did Wu versus Jarren Duran last time. We said, okay, the Red Sox say no. I think in this case, the Mariners say no, Abreu for Wu, but maybe Abreu and stuff for Wu could be a possibility.
All right, back into the early rankings, and 31 through 35, you have Spencer Schwellenbach, Hunter Brown, Zach Gallen, Jack Flaherty, and Grayson Rodriguez. So 4 of the 5 names we have not talked about yet. I think many people would want to hear about Schwellenbach, who is, I think, going to be touted as a pretty obvious breakout pick for many people heading into next season. He got called up. He was great for your Atlanta Braves, a 3.35 ERA, a 1.04 whip. He throws 6 different pitches, the curve and the splitter, had whiff rates over 40%. The strikeout numbers under the hood, everything looked good. The strikeout rate did plummet in September. I wonder was it by design? Was it kind of like the workload was catching up to him type thing? But you tell me, Scott, Spencer Schwellenbach, in or out, breakout next season?
Well, I think I'm in by ranking him this high. I was trying to rank him in a more optimistic way. I'll admit that when I went into this process, I thought he'd come out higher than 31. But again, this whole range of starting pitcher, it's like everybody feels like they're too low, and Schwellenbach is included among that. But look, I got him 2 spots ahead of Zach Gallen. I think that speaks to my level of optimism. Yes, the strikeout rate was down in September. And from watching Braves broadcasts, it sounds like it was by design. It was him concentrating on getting outs earlier in the at-bats so he could pitch deep into games. And I'd rather just see him get strikeouts, but we know he's capable of it. And I think as he gets more established, he'll be able to deliver the best of both worlds, especially since Spencer Schwellenbach's best trait is that he is a strike thrower to the highest degree, 69% strike rate for his entire rookie season. That's going to rank among the league leaders. And it's rare given that he was not particularly established as a pitcher when the Braves drafted him. He progressed through the minors very quickly. He arrived with this 6-pitch arsenal that he did a pretty good job of mixing up and pristine control. It's pretty remarkable, the rise of Spencer Schwellenbach, but there's so much to like here. He's capable of getting whiffs. His control is elite. He has a really diverse arsenal, and he's just getting started. To put into perspective how good Schwellenbach was over the last 2 months, or not even the last 2 months, the last 3 months, July on, Spencer Schwellenbach averaged 18.1 head-to-head points per game. Paul Skeens this year averaged 18.7. So if we're treating that 18.1 over the final 3 months for Schwellenbach as a full season rate, it would have been 4th in baseball behind just Skubal, Wheeler, and Skeens. It would have been ahead of behind Sale also. Sorry. So it would have been 5th in baseball.
Yeah. I am absolutely in, Scott. I'm going to try and get as much Schwellenbach as I can next season. In NFBC draft that I already completed, a 12-team league, I think I took him in round 9 as my SP3. And maybe it's a little bit early, but I think that's the price you're going to have to pay if you want to get the breakout hopeful there in Spencer Schwellenbach. Your SP 36 through 40, you have Joe Ryan, Kodai Senga, Freddie Peralta, Carlos Rodon, and Ronaldo Lopez, another group with 4 names that we have not talked about yet, and Ryan, Senga, Peralta, and Rodon. I want to focus on Senga, who finished as a top 20 starting pitcher in his rookie season, and then he was plagued by injury in year 2. He was limited to just 24 1/3 total innings. That was between the minors, the regular, and the postseason, due to a shoulder strain, a calf strain, tricep soreness. This is another name, Scott, where Kodai Senga feels like a pretty tough pitcher to project and rank for next season.
Yeah, and I've moved him around quite a bit already in my rankings because I don't feel totally comfortable with where I have him. There was a lot of optimism about him heading into 2024, or at least early on. He got hurt. He got hurt early in March, right? So for the bulk of draft season, his value was diminished. But prior to that, he was regarded as a top 15 type pitcher. And so here I have him 37. That seems like a great discount. Obviously, he missed the majority of the year, all but 1 regular season start and then 3 postseason appearances. The regular season start was great. 9 strikeouts, 2 hits allowed, and 5 1/3 innings. Then he strained his calf and didn't pitch again until the postseason, where he didn't look so great. So it's not like we can hang our hat on anything here performance-wise and say, here's why you should be optimistic about Senga. There's just the past optimism, the fact that he looked good as a rookie, got a lot of strikeouts. And I presume that's who he'll be again if he can avoid the injuries. But even looking back at that again, I'm less enthused about it than I was at the time, because 4.2 walks per 9.
It's bad.
1.22 whip. Not as bad, but it's most of the pitchers being drafted in this range are better than that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, even then, he threw only 166 1/3 innings. So it's not like Kodai Senga is a workhorse. He's probably, even if he stays healthy, it's probably going to be kind of limited, the number of innings he throws. I don't know. There are performance concerns here, and there are obvious health concerns. And so I don't want to draft him too early. Where's he going among starting pitchers? Do I have him? Am I above or below consensus here at 37?
So his ADP is 142. He's the 58th pitcher off the board. They don't have it differentiated between starter and reliever, but just eyeballing it, I would think maybe there's like 12 to 15.
I have him 136 overall, so that's about in line.
Overall, you're right. But I think if we knock out the relievers on NFBC, he's probably in the like SP 40 to 45 range, something like that.
Yeah, so I'm not too far off, a little bit ahead. So it sounds like everybody's on the same page with me for that. And so, yeah, you got to account for a few layers of risk here with Senga. And it's another situation where if we were inserting Senga with these circumstances into last year's pitcher pool, he might be 15, 20 spots higher. But there's just not a reason to roll the dice on somebody like this, given that it means passing up on Grayson Rodriguez and Zach Gallen and Joe Ryan, some of those pitchers I have ranked ahead of them. I mean, there's some risk with all of them too, but I'm not sure the payoff, even if everything goes right for Senga. The risks feel more acute for him, and I'm not sure the upside is an order of magnitude different. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's not an order of magnitude different, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you laid it out. Really, the whip is something, if you're drafting Senga, you like, it's a roster construction. You almost have to insulate him with another really good whip pitcher. Like, if you're going to take Senga, you have to maybe have Bailey Ober on your roster or George Kirby. And that's if you want to be competitive in whip and if you're mindful of that. From a points league perspective, he's not the most efficient pitcher. If he walks as many guys, he's probably not going to go all that deep into games. And maybe he'll be limited on the quality starts. So just things to keep in mind with Kodai Senga. I think really talented, but the control is it is a problem.
It is. And I forgot what I was going to say. I had a good thought there, but I forgot it. All Maybe it'll come back to me.
In the meantime, let's get back into this Thanksgiving plate. So far you have green bean casserole, sweet potato, and white meat turkey.
Mm-hmm.
The next side that we're looking for is in the other category here. So, you get like one of these little random things on the side, the cranberry sauce or cornbread or a biscuit, deviled eggs, something in that kind of category, Scott.
Yeah.
So what do you got? What's in the other category on Thanksgiving?
This is a tough one. This is the toughest one.
Ooh,
I'm going to talk about all of them for a bit, if you don't mind, because cranberry sauce feels like such a small thing, but that like punch of like sour, that like jolt, that like, ooh, it like wakes you up. You get a bite of it when you got some turkey already in your mouth. It just kind of makes the whole thing. You really miss it, even though it seems like just this little like dollop on your plate, the cranberry sauce, So it's hard to pass that up. Cornbread and biscuits, okay, whatever. It's not, they're good, but they're like, you kind of eat them all throughout the year. So it doesn't feel like you'd miss it so much on Thanksgiving, I feel like. I will say, there's the way I've constructed this plate. My starch was kind of vegetable-y in the sweet potatoes. A lot of sugar in there, I know, but it's kind of it was kind of a vegetable-y starch, right? And so I don't have that like pure starchness, and so maybe just to round out the plate, I need to get cornbread or biscuits in there. So that's another possibility. One you don't list here that has been a constant at Thanksgiving throughout my life is the ambrosia salad, the marshmallows mixed with the mandarin oranges.
Ooh.
And the cherry, maybe put coconut in there, all mixed together with sour cream. It's something that I don't eat year round, so it feels really unique to the holiday, and it's just something I enjoy for that one time of year where it's available to be enjoyed,
I've never had this, Scott.
I've never had that.
I have no idea what it is.
It's great.
It looks interesting.
It's the sort of thing where if you eat it too much, you're over it pretty quick. But again, I don't eat it that often. I pretty much just at Thanksgiving, maybe at Christmas, and it's another thing, another like cold item that just rounds everything out really well the way cranberry sauce does. But then you put deviled eggs here.
Uh-oh.
I love deviled eggs, Frank. I love deviled eggs. It's another you love them or hate them kind of thing. And I've had them underdressed. You know, you get an underdressed deviled egg where the yolk just tastes like yolk. It's no. You gotta put a lot of mayonnaise, mustard, relish, whatever in there. Really make that yolk not taste like yolk anymore. But it's delish if you do that. And I kind of want to go with that. Like you got to make me good deviled eggs.
You got to, hey.
But if they're good,
this is your plate.
I'm gonna down like 6 of those probably. Gonna be like Gaston with eggs, except it's deviled instead of however he likes his eggs.
All right, so that's what you're going with. You're locking it in, deviled eggs.
I'm locking it in. This was the toughest category, but I'm going deviled eggs, baby.
All right, let's get back into the pitchers here. We don't have much time left, Scott. So let's kind of rush through here. 41 through 45. You have Brian Wu, Tanner Bybee, Shane O'Mac.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Shane McClanahan, Seth Lugo, and Sean Manaea. So Shane McClanahan, the only name of this group we have not talked about. He had Tommy John surgery back in August of 2023. So he's had more than enough time to recover. But this is his second Tommy John surgery. So that causes some complications, Scott. The track record here for 2 Tommy John surgeries is not the best. I feel like McClanahan is a pitcher that could rise in spring training. If the velocity is there and he looks like himself and he's just mowing people down, he's the name that I could see kind of moving up rankings and ADP quite a bit.
Yeah, I could see that too. I could see Shane McClanahan being a big riser based on the way spring training. We get some of those reactions from Pitching Ninja on Twitter in spring training, and suddenly people are pushing Shane McClanahan into the top 20. Maybe some people are already inclined to do that. It's another name where if you asked me going into the rankings process where I'd put Shane McClanahan, I would have said, I don't know, 25, 27, something like that. And he comes out 43 just because other pitchers kept pushing him down. It comes down to me. I really have no idea what to expect from Shane McClanahan coming back from a second Tommy John surgery this year for Walker Buehler, a sobering reminder of how hard that is. I referred, though, to another pitcher who twice had Tommy John surgery, Cole Reagans, and we view him as a consensus top 10 option. And his whole career has come since 2 Tommy John surgeries. So it going to be. It could. Robo's got his back. I don't know what he's doing here today.
It's like me and you together, Scott. It disrupts something in the internet force.
Yeah, it's like a glitch in the matrix.
Yeah.
We need Chris here to stabilize things.
There you go.
I don't know how much of that you heard then. McClanahan, no idea how he's going to respond to a second Tommy John. And Chris pointed this out too. If you look at his actual track record, his major league career has been good overall, but there's only been that one year that was like, oh, this guy's an ace. He's in the Cy Young conversation. It was 2022. And then in 2023, he was good, but he was more second tier good. So I'm not even totally confident in a best case scenario health-wise for McClan what he winds up being. I'd rather play it safe with him, at least until we see how he's looking in spring training.
All right, and SP 46 through 50.
You'll notice, by the way, I did get Tanner Bybee up to 42nd here. When we talked about him yesterday in the last show, it was 47. So I found a way to move Bybee up a little higher because I didn't feel great about where I had him.
All right, and should have mentioned this earlier, but that was the same thing with Bryce Miller, who you moved up to SP 24.
Yeah, he was 32 before. I had him there with Hunter Brown. I think I was just disrespecting him I was presuming nobody was taking his final stat line that seriously, Bryce Miller, but it's clear that everybody is. And I don't have a lot of conviction for where I had him originally. So it's one of those situations where I'm going to default to the wisdom of the masses. But
Robo Scott.
Oh my gosh. You could just edit all of this out since we're not live streaming.
On the audio side, I certainly could, but on the video, people want to see Robo.
We got to wrap this up before he comes back. This is becoming obnoxious.
That's exactly right. SP 46 through 50, you have Jared Jones, Yusei Kikuchi, Christopher Sanchez, Sandy Alcantara, and Spencer Arrighetti. Such an interesting group. Honestly, Scott, if you want to give a quick thought on each, feel free. I just wanted to point out with Arrighetti, final 13 starts, a 3.08 ERA, 118 whip, 10.8 K per nine, 13.3% swinging strike rate, massive whiff potential. I like Spencer Arrighetti quite a bit as well.
Yeah, his early ADP is a good example of why I'm not sure the people putting together that early ADP are people who do what we do, who analyze fantasy baseball as like their job, because we know Arrighetti was a different pitcher at the end of the season, and yet he's being drafted so far like a guy who had a 4.53 ERA and 141 whip last year, which technically he did, but that's not who he was by the end of last season. And so 50, I think, is great value for him if time doesn't push him up the rankings. Jared Jones, we were head over heels for him early in the season. It was basically just April. He was pretty good for most of May too, but pretty useless after that. And I know he spent some time on the IL, but even when he was healthy, Jared Jones just wasn't sharp and didn't seem like he was fooling anybody. He wasn't getting whiffs like he was. 829 on for Jared Jones, 8.8 fantasy points per game. That is dreadful. That is like, let me give you an example. Like Chris Bassett was 9.3 for the year in a terrible year for him. And Jared Jones was worse than that from May 29th on. So I think there's upside. I think he'll be better in the long run, but I'm treating him with skepticism because I don't know how long it's going to take to get there. Down to 48 just because it felt like I was too high on him compared to the consensus. And he's more of a floor pick than a ceiling pick, not a big strikeout guy, but threw a lot of innings for the Phillies. Obviously, good team backing him, high ground ball rate. The control, we're a little less sure about the control for Sanchez, but he has the potential to be a good strike thrower. So I see Christopher Sanchez as like a much better, a much more predictable version of Ranger Suarez, and would rather have him by about 30 spots in the rankings here. Alcantara coming back from injury. First Tommy John for him, but we're not exactly sure how that's going to play, and he wasn't the profile for Alcantara even before Tommy John surgery. Didn't feel totally secure. He was great, but in an unconventional way, not a big strikeout rate, a lot of ground balls. It's going to take, it's going to be kind of a tightrope. It was always kind of a tightrope walk for Sandy Alcantara, but coming back from Tommy John surgery, more risk of him, I think, losing his balance and falling off the tightrope. And then he's got the Marlins backing him, which is just
not great.
That makes it extra hard for him to matter. And then I already mentioned Arrighetti. Talked about him at number 50. So there you have it, my top 50 pitchers. Is there anybody else? Is there anybody we didn't get to in that top 50 that we just have to say something about?
My computer's kind of running slowly. I wanted to pull up ADP and maybe look through who are some of the names you have just outside your top 50.
Okay, well, just outside my top 50. 51 is Brandon Woodruff, also coming back from injury. 52 and 53, Ryan Pepio and Taj Bradley, who I've moved down based on where the Rays will be playing their games next year. I think it's going to be really tough for them. Bowden Francis comes in 54. And then you get Ronel Blanco and Luis Gil, two pitchers who I don't totally believe in, but they had great years right after that. But notably, those are the names outside the top 50. So we're clearly dropping off there in terms of tier, because I've been saying all along 15 to 50. I don't care so much about the order. I think it's almost one giant tier. Those pitchers I just mentioned are outside of that tier.
I'll mention some names in ADP that are kind of inside the top 50 starting pitchers drafted right now that you don't have ranked that way.
Okay.
So Kevin Gausman, Shane Baz, Robbie Ray, Zach Eflin, Brandon Pfaadt, Luis Heel. Those are, that kind of rounds out that's a similar range. So those were names that you didn't have in your top 50 or even top 55, right? I don't think I heard any of those names. So,
well, Luis Heel feels like the opposite of Spencer Arrighetti, where it's just people looking at people looking at the full season numbers and coming away impressed, and not looking at the breakdown, how he got to those full season numbers. Where great start for Luis Heel, dreadful finish, and there was reason for skepticism even when he was pitching well. So I tend to put more stock in the finish. Kevin Gausman, that feels like a legacy pick. We saw clear decline from him this past year. He's 58 for me, but yeah, outside that group, Shane Baz, he was solid, but he didn't have his slider and didn't get strikeouts at the rate we were hoping for. And I'm just not sure where he stands. If he's totally 100%, or we didn't totally know what kind of pitcher he was before the Tommy John surgery. So I think there's a lot of questions Baz has to answer, and I can't really understand taking him ahead of Christopher Sanchez, for instance, when Sanchez just feels so stable. Did it raise an eyebrow for you that I have Zach Gallen as low as 33rd? Because I kind of separated him from the rest of those top of the ranking mainstays who are good at eating innings, the Pablo Lopez and Aaron Nola types. Gallen's usually ranked up there with them. I dropped them a lot, but I dropped him even more. How do you feel about that?
I think it's all right. I think there's an argument to be made either way. But the fastball effectiveness is declining, and the whip was high last year. Walks were a problem. He has this underlying, is there an injury kind of lingering from a couple years ago? So I think it's fine. I think anywhere from the 24 to 36 range, like that SP3 range, I think that's fine for Zach Gallen.
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of just come to the point with him where, okay, that 2.54 ERA in 2022 is such an outlier. He's more like a 3.60 ERA guy, sort of like I was saying for Pablo Lopez. And then there was just a lot of weirdness in the second half that makes me wonder if Gallen's completely healthy.
Yeah.
So that's why he's another dozen spots lower than Pablo Lopez. But 33 still puts him in the same range as Spencer Schwellenbach, Hunter Brown, and Grayson Rodriguez. So it's not as much of a diss as it looks like, but it is while some pitchers that seemed too low just kept getting pushed down, Gallen was pulled down a little more deliberately.
All right, take us home, Scott. We're looking for a Thanksgiving dessert. Many different options, many different ways you can go. Mm-hmm. Every pie under the sun. You got pumpkin pie, apple pie, pecan pie. You go with pudding, a little whipped cream on top, maybe some ice cream. What do we
Interesting that you call it pecan pie.
Yeah,
I love pies.
I heard you say pecan earlier in the podcast.
Yeah. Well, pecan is pecan. I thought that was the Southern way to say it. So I thought I trained that out of me, and Mr. New Yorker is calling it pecan.
Whoa. It's New Jersey now.
Yeah.
I think you could say it either way.
Okay. But you've always said pecan. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Pecan sounds a little unappealing, but that's fine. I like pecan more. What's my favorite? I like pies a lot, and I don't eat them enough. Like pies should have like birthday pies. I like cream pies. I like chocolate cream pie. I like coconut cream pie.
Chocolate cream pie is the best.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
It's the best.
But I am more of a traditionalist, as I said. I'm not going to go with the pumpkin. I've always thought pumpkin pie was overrated. It's not very sweet. If you give me a piece of pumpkin pie without whipped cream, I'm not sure I'm going to finish it. Like, the whole appeal is the whipped cream, and like that's not a good enough justification to eat the pumpkin pie. So I will eat some pumpkin pie. You know, I'll get a little of every dessert you have. But I'm not like looking forward to the pumpkin pie. Pecan is close enough to traditional, but I am going to zhuzh it up a little because you got regular pecan pie and then you got chocolate pecan pie. Have you ever had chocolate pecan pie, Frank?
I don't think I have.
It takes it to another level. And that's the pie I want on Thanksgiving. Chocolate pecan pie.
I thought you were going to go with the apple pie. My next question would have been,
Ooh, apple pie's good.
Apple pie is good. If you heat it up for a little bit, throw some ice cream on top. Oof. So good. But here we go. Scott's ideal Thanksgiving plate.
I eat all the desserts, Frank. I'm not going to lie.
We've got white meat.
In addition to my marshmallow side and my laced with brown sugar sweet potatoes. It's Thanksgiving, you know?
Hey,
got to do it right. I'll just drink water. It'll all wash out.
White meat turkey for Scott, green bean casserole, sweet potato, deviled eggs, chocolate pecan pie. There you go. That's Scott's ideal Thanksgiving plate.
There you go.
Are going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning into Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And Chris and I will be back again on Wednesday. Bye-bye.